This is a classic epic masterpiece that has remained unsurpassed for the past decade. To punish the brutal Egyptian pharaoh and to avenge the hundreds of thousands of oppressed Hebrew people, the Hebrew god furiously sends down 10 plagues upon Egypt. The first plague is the giant crocodiles in the water. Countless subterranean crocodiles suddenly turn violent. They surface and begin a frenzied slaughter of every living thing in sight. The fishermen living by the water are the first to be massacred. From this point on, all waters become forbidden territory for humans. The second plague targets the fish living in the water. No fish escapes this frantic slaughter, and spots of scarlet eventually dye every mountain, stream, and river in the entire Egyptian dynasty red. Their vital water sources are simultaneously destroyed. The pharaoh attempts to pray to the Egyptian gods to purify the water, but he receives no response. The third plague is even more terrifying. Countless underwater frogs, having lost their clean aquatic environment, are forced to crawl out of the blood-polluted rivers in vast numbers for survival. They sweep toward human settlements. In an instant, human territories are completely invaded by frogs hoping to find clean water to survive, yet they fail to find a single drop. Without water, the frogs immediately begin to die en masse. Next comes the horrific fourth plague. Piles of frog corpses begin to rot rapidly, creating a paradise for maggots and flies. Suddenly, maggots on the ground and flies in the air occupy most of the human living space. The little food humans have left is completely contaminated. The black swarms of insects blot out the sun, and humans have lost all ability to resist them. Yet, inside the pharaoh's palace, the wealthy nobles continue their high-minded talk, assuming that once the rotting corpses on land are decomposed by the insects, the pests will die off naturally. Little do they know, a sudden pestilence follows close behind. This is the fifth plague sent by the Hebrew god. Bodies of commoners and royal family members alike, including the pharaoh, begin to develop lesions. This unknown disease leaves even the witch doctors helpless. People have no choice but to die in agony in massive numbers. Moses cannot bear to see the commoners suffer, so he rides out on a white horse, intending to reach a settlement with the pharaoh to appease the Hebrew god's anger. However, the pharaoh considers himself a god. Furthermore, the Hebrew god is not the deity he worships, so why would he choose to submit? Consequently, he turns his anger back onto the Hebrew slaves. The hard labor for building the pyramids is doubled, and the death toll of the Hebrews begins to climb sharply. This deeply grieves Moses, who had made the agreement with the Hebrew god. His faith begins to waver at this moment. Even with divine help, it is the common people who are dying the most. He does not know who exactly these disasters are meant to punish. Soon after, the sixth plague descends. Wild animals in the wilderness suddenly vanish, and the 6 types of livestock humans rely on begin to drop dead one after another. The pharaoh watches as the white horse that has accompanied him for years meets a tragic end, so he once again seeks a cure from his royal physician. However, the nature of this natural disaster is far beyond the physician's understanding. He tries to bluff his way through again, claiming that once the new wave of maggots and insects decomposes the livestock corpses, everything will return to calm. As a result, he is immediately subjected to cruel punishment by the pharaoh. Next, the pharaoh seeks a solution from his high priestess. However, the priestess has prayed to over a dozen main gods, yet none have responded. In a fit of rage, the pharaoh subjects the priestess to torture as well. The 7th plague follows quickly, accompanied by a massive roaring sound from the sky. Hailstones the size of fists pour down like rain. Even the statue of the Egyptian goddess standing in the square is severely damaged. The last shred of hope for humanity vanishes in an instant. Moses looks at the unpredictable celestial phenomena over the distant royal city. His compassion makes him want to terminate this deal with the Hebrew god. However, the Hebrew god does not appear this time. When Moses leaves in anger, the Hebrew god suddenly appears behind him, staring at his retreating figure. This foreshadows that no one can stop the Hebrew god from sending down the 8th plague. Dense swarms of locusts cover the earth and attack humans, turning everything they pass into a wasteland. The scene above the royal city is even more terrifying. The sun-blocking locusts dive straight for the palace. All the luxury within the palace instantly loses its color. Immediately following is the 9th plague. Before this, people without food could still survive on plants and wild vegetables. But now even tree leaves and bark have become a luxury. On this day, they rush into the palace granary, attempting to seize some food from the pharaoh. However, this is destined to be a tragedy. During the chaos, a fire unfortunately ignites the entire granary. Those who manage to grab food and escape the granary safely cannot escape the pharaoh's punishment. A fully formed military unit has already surrounded the area. Rows of archers launch the first round of attacks, and a dense rain of arrows shoots toward everyone coming out of the granary. Next, the axemen step forward to carry out the final harvest. Only the pharaoh stands on the distant palace wall, quietly admiring the scene before him. However, in the next second, bolt of lightning suddenly strikes from the sky, and the entire combat unit is instantly turned to dust. Next is the final disaster the Hebrew god prepares to unleash. Because this disaster is too dark, more terrifying than the sum of the previous 9, it is firmly rejected by Moses. However, to show his majesty, the Hebrew god instantly tears through the night, releasing 10,000 rays of light. Immediately after, a terrifying presence is summoned by him and descends upon the mortal world, and this day eventually becomes the darkest day in Egypt. But let us go back to how this began. Egyptian Pharaoh Ramses II leads 3,500 chariots and nearly 40,000 soldiers to launch a surprise attack on the Hittite kingdom's border, aiming to seize a major military fortress in Syria. The Hittite king, having received intelligence in advance, personally leads 16,000 troops to guard the border, hoping to avoid this war. However, the great battle is triggered nonetheless. Upon Ramses' command, his chariot unit launches the first attack. Countless arrows rain down on the Hittite cavalry. Before contact is even made, the Hittite cavalry has lost more than half its forces. He launches a second volley, and arrows pour down like rain on the enemy's vanguard. The already heavily damaged enemy cavalry suffers another crushing blow. Seeing they have completely lost their initial offensive capability, the shield-bearers have no choice but to line up, attempting to stop the approaching heavy chariots. However, this is ultimately like a mantis trying to stop a cart. Their defense line is torn open instantly by the speeding chariots. Seeing the enemy formation in chaos, caring only for the front and unable to watch the rear, General Moses gives an order. Countless light cavalry charge straight into the enemy camp from behind, ruthlessly harvesting the Hittite soldiers. But just then, Ramses, who has already charged into the center of the enemy camp, sees the soldier beside him get his throat pierced by an arrow. To ensure the battle isn't affected, Ramses pushes the soldier off the chariot and fights alone while driving. However, a good warrior is not necessarily a good charioteer. Under the pincer attack of 2 enemy chariots, Ramses soon falls into a dire predicament. In this critical moment, a chariot suddenly appearing in front of him knocks him into a hopeless position. Losing his chariot, he struggles to get up, preparing to retrieve his weapon. Just then, another chariot drives toward him. Seeing that Ramses is about to become a ghost under the wheels, Moses, who is fighting in the enemy camp, finally notices something is wrong. He casually picks up a piece of iron from the ground and jams it straight into the wheel of the speeding chariot. Ramses is successfully saved. However, it is precisely this act by Moses that ultimately sows the seeds of his tragic fate. Just before the army set out, Pharaoh Seti followed a centuries-old tradition, killing a goose before a great battle and using the liver to divine the outcome. The result disappointed everyone present. The priestess pointed out that the goose liver gave no indication regarding the battle, but pointed to another clue. In this battle, a ruler would be saved by another person, and that savior would one day become the new leader. Moses thought this was just a lie from the priestess, but the Egyptian prince Ramses was very wary of this prophecy. Now, seeing the first half of the prophecy come true, Ramses gradually loses the will to fight. He picks up an enemy spear and aims it directly at Moses, who grew up with him, from behind. Moses, focused on fighting, suddenly turns his head, whether it was unintentional or because he had already been on his guard. Upon his command, soldiers immediately lift the injured Ramses onto a chariot. With this, the Battle of Kadesh finally comes to an end. Seeing the victorious return, the citizens line the streets to celebrate. Pharaoh Seti also expresses his congratulations. However, the pharaoh keenly senses that something happened on the battlefield. Under his questioning, Moses finally reveals the entire process of saving Ramses. Surprisingly, the pharaoh is not only unsurprised, but he also feels that Moses is more suitable to be the next ruler of Egypt than his own son. But ultimately, Moses is just his sister's son. Following this, Pharaoh Seti sends Ramses to Pithom to inspect the construction of the pyramids. In the eyes of the kingdom's nobles, this is a task that should be done by lower-ranking, unimportant officials. The night before Ramses departs, Moses actively finds Ramses and promises to complete the task in his place. He also hopes Ramses can forget what happened on the battlefield that day. However, in Ramses' heart, a seed of darkness has been planted. Even if he says nothing, the demon in his heart constantly reminds him of that prophecy. When Moses sets foot on the land of Pithom for the first time, the horrific scene before him leaves him in shock. Hundreds of thousands of Hebrew slaves have been toiling here for centuries. To appease the masses, Moses decides to gain a deeper understanding of their situation. However, this conversation unintentionally brings out a prophecy that has been circulating among the Hebrews for centuries. Upon learning Moses' identity, an elder secretly sends a messenger to slip him a note, inviting him to a secret meeting at the prayer house that night. And it is precisely this meeting that completely rewrites the destiny of Moses and the hundreds of thousands of Hebrew slaves. It turns out that in the year Moses was born, a prophecy suddenly began to spread across the land of Egypt. A new leader who would liberate the Hebrews was about to be born. The rumor quickly reached the pharaoh's ears. That year, the Egyptian pharaoh slaughtered all Hebrew newborns, thereby thoroughly crushing their hope of returning to the Hebrew holy land of Canaan. But fate had already decided everything. In desperation, Moses' parents placed him in a basket and cast him into the river. Instead of dying, Moses drifted downstream and floated right to where the pharaoh's sister was bathing. He was found by her and raised as her own. He even became the premier great commander of the Egyptian dynasty. This revelation leaves Moses, who once doubted his identity, in a daze. As he leaves, he angrily kills 2 Egyptian soldiers who try to provoke him. This quickly attracts the attention of Hegep, the governor of the pyramid construction. During his investigation, he accidentally discovers the secret of Moses' origins. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Pharaoh Seti suddenly dies of illness, and Ramses smoothly succeeds him, becoming the new pharaoh of the Egyptian dynasty. One day, Hegep quietly comes to the palace and informs Ramses of Moses' true identity. This causes Ramses, who already held a grudge against Moses, to finally explode. However, when it comes time to actually kill his former brother, he cannot bring himself to do it. Ultimately, he exiles Moses forever to the uninhabited desert wasteland. As Moses leaves, Ramses gives him his own sword to help his former brother protect himself in times of danger. Moses wanders alone in the desert for who knows how many years, crossing countless mountains and rivers. One day, a village finally appears before his eyes. When he stops to drink water, he is fortunate enough to meet the love of his life, Zipporah. This finally stops the wandering steps of Moses. In the blink of an eye, many years pass, and Gershom, the child of Moses and Zipporah, has gradually grown up. They look at the sacred mountain before them. To Zipporah's people, it is a holy mountain that mortals cannot cross. However, as an outsider, Moses simply does not believe in the God they worship. Because of this, a conflict erupts between Zipporah and Moses. Shortly after, while Moses is herding sheep, a violent storm rarely seen in a century suddenly whips up in the sky. The lost lambs strangely climb all the way toward the sacred mountain. To chase the flock, Moses climbs this sacred mountain for the first time. Just then, a mudslide suddenly rushes down, completely burying Moses. As the sky turns dim, a soul-shaking call wakes him from his stupor. A nearby bush suddenly ignites with a strange blue flame, and immediately after, a peculiarly dressed boy appears beside him. He claims to be the messenger of the God of Abraham and says he needs a general to rescue his people. He then casually arranges a model on a rock. When Moses comes to his senses again, the child has vanished without a trace. Even more magically, when he wakes up again, he finds himself lying beside his wife. Zipporah says the storm and mudslide he saw never happened. The tribe simply assumes Moses injured his head in a fall. However, only Moses knows he must take up his mission again. After recovering, he bids farewell to his wife and son, choosing to head to Pithom where the pyramids are. Although Zipporah had no idea what was really happening, she even believed that he wanted to leave because of their disagreement over faith. And in her desperation to keep Moses, she wept and said she was willing to give up her own beliefs. She does not know that Moses is leaving for a much grander goal, nor could she imagine that when Moses returns next, he will appear before her as a leader, with hundreds of thousands of his people filling the entire village and the entire valley.
Who are they?
They're my people.
Summoned by the Hebrew God, Moses leaves his home again and rides all the way back to Pithom. The tragic fate of his people before his eyes finally begins to awaken him. He goes to the prayer house of the Hebrew slaves for the second time and takes out his weapon to show his resolve. From this moment on, the war of resistance for the Hebrew slaves, oppressed for over 400 years, is about to begin. At this same time, Ramses suddenly wakes from his sleep. An inexplicable fear keeps him awake, so he goes alone to another room to check on his child. After confirming that his child is safe and sound, he goes alone to the palace stables to clear his mind. But suddenly, a long sword is placed against his neck. It is the very sword he gave Moses as a gift upon their parting. The two former brothers meet again. However, Moses is not here to catch up. He wants Ramses to release the 400,000 Hebrew slaves to return to their homeland. In Ramses' view, the slaves have been enslaved for over 400 years and are used to this life. If released suddenly, they would be like captive-bred beasts released into the forest, unable to survive. Seeing that negotiations are failing, Moses has to leave again. Next, he will use his own methods to end all of this. He secretly forges weapons with the slaves while using his lifelong expertise to train the soldiers, simultaneously selecting a group of military leaders to cultivate their command abilities. They prepare to fight the oppression of the entire Egyptian dynasty with bodies of slaves. Back at the palace, Ramses gradually hears rumors and immediately orders a city-wide manhunt for Moses, but he never succeeds. So one day he gathers the slaves and issues a warning. If Moses is not caught, He will exterminate one slave family every day. The slaves never know if tomorrow it will be their entire family, living in fear daily. However, their resistance gradually escalates. They ignite the army's reserve warehouses to cut off supplies. Then, hundreds of fire arrows are fired in unison, illuminating the pharaoh's entire palace. Supply ships heading for the palace sink into the sea one after another. Seeing the slave resistance intensifying, Ramses orders thousands of soldiers to sweep through the slave mountain overnight. Many slaves are swallowed by fire in their sleep. The murderous flames illuminate the entire slave mountain. Seeing mass civilian deaths overnight, one person can finally no longer endure it. He finds Moses again. This person is the Hebrew God. He wants Moses to start a war as soon as possible to end this suffering. However, human methods are always inefficient and slow. Moses needs a long time to dismantle the Egyptian dynasty bit by bit. As a result, the Hebrew God, who has been silent for over 400 years, finally loses patience.
For now, you can watch.
What he is going to do is help Moses completely overturn the rule of the Egyptian dynasty. So next, in his fury, he sends down the 10 plagues upon Egypt. We have already detailed the first 9 plagues. Next comes the 10th plague. Because the 10th plague is too dark and more terrifying than the sum of the previous 9, it is firmly resisted by Moses. However, to show his majesty, the Hebrew God instantly tears through the night, releasing 10,000 rays of light. Seeing that all of Egypt is about to fall into darkness, Moses goes to the Egyptian palace again while it is still light. He wants to advise Ramses to reach a settlement immediately and release the 400,000 Hebrew slaves to return to their homeland. But how could Ramses listen? Before leaving, Moses warns Ramses to watch over his child tonight. That night, although Ramses does not know what will happen, he lights all the oil lamps in the palace and guards his child's side, holding the royal sword. On the other side, Moses, having just returned to the slave mountain, immediately orders every household to slaughter a lamb and smear the lamb's blood on their doorframes. Although no one understands why, they follow Moses' instructions. When the dark night finally falls, Moses himself does not know what will happen. In the next second, a sun-blocking black shadow begins to envelop the earth. Wherever it passes, all of Egypt plunges into darkness. As the massive shadow advances, the entire slave mountain is swallowed by the giant entity in the sky, but because of the lamb's blood on the doorframes, they remain unharmed. When this shadow finally reaches the sky above the Egyptian royal city, all lights are extinguished wherever it passes. Even more terrifying is that all children covered by the shadow die mysteriously in an instant. Inside the Egyptian palace, as the dark night shadow descends, the brightly lit palace gradually dims. The burning lamps extinguish eerily. When the shadow sweeps over the young Egyptian prince, his young life is ended in an instant. Ramses wakes up with a start, sensing something is wrong, but it is already too late. Tonight,
Ramses?
the most prosperous capital of Egypt has all its firstborns slaughtered overnight. The entire royal city instantly falls into wailing. Following this, the storm-like 10 plagues are finally too much for Ramses to bear. The next day, holding his dead child, he comes to the front of the slave mountain, humiliatingly reaches a settlement with Moses, and voluntarily releases the 400,000 Hebrew slaves to return to the Holy Land of Canaan in their hearts.
Every one of you! Go! Go to Canaan if that's what you want.
Thus, a mighty epic migration of the Hebrews leaving Egypt begins. However, this is just the start. Right after Ramses buries his son with his own hands, a massive pursuit begins to stop the Pharaoh's army of hundreds of thousands and save his 400,000 Hebrew people. Just as the Pharaoh goes back on his word and prepares to exterminate the slaves, the Hebrew God slashes the vast ocean in half with a single strike. At this moment, the slaves face a torrent in front of them, and hundreds of thousands of pursuing soldiers rushing toward them from behind. Seeing they are in a hopeless situation, the slaves can only helplessly wait for fate's final judgment. However, early the next morning, a magical scene leaves everyone dumbfounded. The vast ocean that was in front of them last night has had its tide recede, slowly revealing dry land. Upon leader Moses' command, hundreds of thousands of fleeing Hebrews set off toward the sea. On the other side, Ramses, commanding hundreds of thousands of chariot cavalry, is following the Hebrews' trail, rushing toward them to annihilate the 400,000 Hebrews at the edge of the Red Sea. However, due to Moses' precise prediction earlier, he determined that a rugged mountain road would become a natural barrier against Ramses' army. His prediction proves effective. The rugged and narrow mountain road makes every step for Ramses' army treacherous. Hagep accidentally falls from his chariot, and the chariot behind him, unable to brake in time, runs him over instantly. This accident quickly causes a series of chain reaction disasters for the convoy behind. On the congested road, chariots rear-end each other one after another. Spooked horses take speeding chariots rolling down the cliff, and the entire section of the road begins to collapse violently. This is the first price Ramses pays for this expedition. Meanwhile, the 400,000 Hebrews crossing the Red Sea have reached the middle of the ocean. The seawater is dry. Once they cross this strait, no one can stop them from returning to Canaan. Ramses finally arrives. Watching the 400,000 Hebrew slaves drifting away, he gives an order, and the army of hundreds of thousands charges wildly toward the sea. Moses finally spots the Egyptian army catching up from behind. He urges the slaves to speed up their crossing while leading his limited combat forces to prepare for battle with Ramses. Seeing Ramses' army getting closer, the Hebrew god's divine punishment finally begins to descend. In the distant sky, black clouds wrapped in lightning and storms rush toward the battlefield. Even more terrifying is that just as all the Hebrews finally reach the other side of the strait, a torrent dozens of meters high, like a banished giant beast, sweeps toward the humans with the force of 10,000 tons. In the face of such divine punishment, how can flesh and blood humans have any power to resist? But Ramses, who proclaimed himself a god, shoved the soldiers beside him off the chariot and charged forward without hesitation, rushing straight toward the Hebrew slaves. His general, seeing that there is no chance of winning this battle, orders all troops to turn back immediately, leaving Ramses alone to fight Moses. Seeing the Egyptian army retreat, Moses immediately orders his subordinates to withdraw to the coastline to join the civilians, while he stays alone to make a final settlement with his former brother, Ramses. As the distance between the two closes, the monstrous waves are also gradually approaching them. Finally reaching the front, the two slowly stop. Ramses shouts a challenge and charges at Moses, but the water is already upon them. 100-foot waves roll in continuously. In the next second, the Egyptian Pharaoh Ramses is completely buried by the torrent, and the Hebrew leader Moses is also swallowed by the seawater. The hundreds of thousands of Egyptian soldiers unable to retreat in time are also not spared. Floating corpses and chariots drift throughout the Red Sea Strait. Countless Egyptians who just lost their children have now lost their husbands and sons. But the Hebrews have finally escaped the prison that held them for over 400 years. Ramses, who miraculously survives, looks at his dead soldiers as vultures begin to scavenge their bodies. On Moses' side, he also survives the disaster. He leads the hundreds of thousands of Hebrews toward their ancestral land of Canaan. Passing through his home, Moses stops and sincerely invites his wife to go with him. However, when passing Mount Sinai, the Hebrew god looks at the 400,000 Hebrews and shakes his head. He borrows Moses' hand to promulgate 10 commandments, known in history as the 10 Commandments of Moses, to constrain all Hebrew people to return to the righteous path. However, a large number of the people still feel dissatisfied and complain. In a rage, the Hebrew god decrees that the 400,000 Hebrews shall never enter the land of Canaan. After wandering for decades, only after all the first generation of Hebrews who left Egypt, including Moses, have died out, does the Hebrew god guide them back to the Holy Land of Canaan.